She is not allowed to eat here. Chef Gordon Pike's voice cut through the kitchen at 6:38 in the evening, and every spoon, tray, and whispered conversation seemed to stop at once. Lena Brooks sat at the far end of the staff table with both hands around a bowl of hot vegetable soup, the first warm food she had touched since sunrise. Her gray housekeeping uniform was still damp at the cuffs from cleaning the crystal glasses upstairs, and a faint line of exhaustion rested beneath her eyes. Gordon stood over her in a white chef coat, one hand gripping the edge of her plate. Before Lena could respond, he pulled the bowl away. The soup trembled against the porcelain but did not spill. "Housekeeping eats after service," he said, "and not at this table." Around them, the Bellucci estate kitchen moved beneath bright copper lights and the heavy scent of roasted herbs, fresh bread, and butter. Dozens of plates waited to be carried into the formal dining room, where wealthy guests would soon attend a charity dinner dedicated to supporting low-income workers. Lena had spent the afternoon polishing the silverware they would use. She had arranged the flowers beside cards printed with words like dignity, opportunity, and fairness. Now she was being told that the chair beneath her did not belong to her. "I finished my assignment," Lena said quietly. "Mrs. Sloan said I could take 10 minutes. Gordon looked toward the house manager, but Margaret Sloan had already lowered her eyes to the seating chart in her hands. "Mrs. Sloan does not run my kitchen," he replied. "This table is for culinary staff." Lena looked at the empty chairs around her. "There are 12 seats. That does not change your position." The words were spoken with the confidence of a rule that had been repeated so often no one remembered who created it. Daniel Cho, the young sous chef, stood beside the stove holding a folded towel. He looked as though he wanted to speak, but Gordon's glance silenced him before a word could form. Lena rose slowly. She did not argue. She had learned during 8 months at the estate that the quickest way to keep her hours was to leave before humiliation became a discussion. Gordon opened a lower refrigerator and removed a cardboard container. Inside was a slice of cold bread and vegetables left from lunch. "Take this downstairs," he said. Lena accepted the container with both hands. "Thank you." That gratitude seemed to satisfy him more than obedience. She turned toward the service hallway, then noticed a dishwasher named Miguel standing near the sinks. He was 19, pale from working through the afternoon without a break, and staring at the bread without meaning to. Lena stopped, tore the slice in half, and placed one piece on a clean napkin beside him. "Eat before the dinner rush," she whispered. Miguel shook his head. "That is yours." "Not all of it." From the shadowed doorway behind the pantry, Adrian Bellucci watched the exchange. He had entered the kitchen looking for Gordon before the guests arrived, but the first words he heard had been the ones denying Lena a seat. Adrian wore a black suit and a white shirt, his expression unreadable beneath the warm light. He had built a reputation that made powerful men choose their language carefully, yet inside his own home, an exhausted woman had just thanked someone for giving her cold leftovers. Worse, every person in the kitchen had behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. Gordon finally noticed him. The color in the chef's face shifted. "Mr. Bellucci, I was about to come find you." Adrian did not answer. His gaze moved from the hot bowl Gordon had taken away to the cardboard container in Lena's hands, then to the empty chair she had been forced to leave. The charity dinner upstairs was supposed to honor human dignity. Down here, dignity had been treated like a privilege assigned by rank. Adrian walked toward the table, pulled out the chair beside Lena's abandoned place, and sat down. "Bring back her soup," he said. Gordon froze. Adrian looked at the cold bread in Lena's hand. "And serve me exactly what you decided she deserved." Gordon stared at Adrian as though the order had been spoken in another language. No one in the kitchen moved. The burners hissed beneath copper pans, plates waited beneath warming lamps, and somewhere beyond the service doors, the first guests were beginning to arrive. Lena remained standing with the cardboard container in her hands. "Mr. Bellucci," Gordon said carefully, "the staff meal policy is designed to keep service organized." Adrian rested one hand on the table. "Then organize it." Gordon forced a smile. "Of course. I only meant that housekeeping has a separate meal period." "Where is that written?" The smile disappeared. Margaret Sloan looked down at the seating chart again, but Adrian turned toward her. "Margaret." She hesitated. "There is no written seating rule." "Then who created it?" The kitchen seemed to shrink around the question. Gordon adjusted the cuff of his chef coat. "It developed over time. Culinary staff need access to the table during preparation. Adrian looked at the 12 empty chairs. All 12. Gordon did not answer. Adrian pointed to the cardboard container Lena still held. Put that in front of me. Lena stepped closer, uncomfortable with every eye following her. Sir, it is all right. I can eat downstairs. Adrian looked up at her. How long have you been eating downstairs? She tightened her grip on the container. It is not important. It became important when everyone in this room decided it was normal. His tone was not loud, but it ended the discussion. Lena placed the container before him. The cold vegetables had dried along the edges, and the bread was hard enough to bend without breaking. Adrian opened the lid fully. This is the meal assigned to housekeeping. Gordon spoke quickly. It is not assigned. It is simply what remained from lunch. And the soup. Prepared for kitchen staff. Adrian turned toward Daniel Cho. How many portions were made? Daniel glanced at Gordon before answering. 24. How many culinary employees are working tonight? 11. Adrian looked back at Gordon. Then explained why she could not have one bowl. Gordon's expression hardened beneath the professional calm. Because standards disappear when boundaries disappear. Once every department enters the kitchen whenever they choose, service becomes disorderly. Lena lowered her eyes. She had heard versions of the same argument for months. Housekeeping was asked to clean after everyone, but expected to remain unseen while others ate. Maintenance workers were told to use the loading area. Dishwashers stood near the sinks with paper cups while chefs sat at the table. The rule had never been printed because it did not need to be. Fear kept it in place. Adrian turned to Lena. Sit down. She did not move. Please, he added. The second word changed the room more than the first. Lena slowly returned to the chair. Adrian remained beside her. Gordon retrieved the bowl of soup and placed it in front of Lena with controlled precision. Adrian pushed the cardboard container away from himself. Now bring me the same soup. Gordon looked toward the service doors. Your guests are waiting upstairs. They can wait 2 minutes. Adrian's gaze moved across the kitchen. I am learning something about my house. Daniel brought a second bowl before Gordon could respond. Adrian lifted the spoon, but he did not eat immediately. Who else is told they cannot sit here? No one answered. Miguel kept his eyes on the sink. Margaret pressed the seating chart against her chest. Lena looked at the soup, steam rising against her tired face. Adrian waited. Silence had protected the rule for 8 months. He would not allow it to protect the people who created it. Finally, Daniel set down his towel. Dishwashing staff, he said. Gordon turned toward him. Daniel continued before fear could stop him. Maintenance too. Temporary workers are usually sent to the loading area. Adrian looked at Lena. And you knew? Yes. Why did no one tell me? Lena met his eyes. Because the people who need the hours are usually the ones least able to risk them. Adrian looked around the kitchen again, seeing not one cruel moment, but an entire system built from small humiliations. He placed his spoon beside the bowl. No one leaves this table, he said, until I understand who has been paying for these meals and who has been denied them. Gordon froze, and for the first time that evening, Lena did not carry her food away. Adrian did not raise his voice, yet the kitchen obeyed him with the speed of a room that understood power. Margaret placed the seating chart on the counter and opened the staff operations binder. Daniel stepped away from the stove long enough to retrieve the meal schedule. Gordon remained beside the table, his expression composed but increasingly rigid. Lena lifted one spoonful of soup, though the heat had already begun to fade. She could feel every person watching her eat, as if the simple act of remaining seated had become an accusation. The dinner service begins in 6 minutes, Gordon said. We can review administrative details afterward. Adrian looked at the clock above the pantry door. You had 8 months to review them. Gordon's jaw tightened. I was maintaining standards. Standards should be written. Margaret turned through the binder. There is a staff meal policy, she said carefully. All employees working more than 6 hours receive one prepared meal during their shift. Adrian extended his hand. She brought him the page. The policy made no distinction between departments, seating areas, or meal quality. It required the kitchen budget to provide a complete meal to every eligible worker. Adrian read the final line twice. How many employees qualify tonight? Margaret checked the schedule. 32. How many meals were prepared? Daniel answered. 24 official portions. Gordon turned toward him. That number does not include late service items. Daniel held his ground. The late service items are usually leftovers. Adrian looked at the cardboard container beside his elbow. Like this. No one answered. Lena set down her spoon. Mr. Bellucci, the guests are here for an important cause. I do not want this to disrupt the evening. Adrian turned toward her. The cause is dignity for working people. His gaze moved toward the service doors leading upstairs. The evening was already disrupted. The guests simply do not know it yet. Gordon folded his arms. You are making a household misunderstanding sound like misconduct. Adrian handed the policy to Margaret. Then the records will prove you right. He asked for the food invoices, employee meal counts, inventory reports, and monthly kitchen budget. Gordon said those documents were stored in his office and could not be reviewed during service. Adrian instructed Margaret to secure the office after dinner and preserve every record. He then turned to Daniel. Who receives full meals? Daniel looked around the kitchen before speaking. Chefs, pastry staff, event servers, and senior household employees. Who receives leftovers? Housekeeping, dishwashing, maintenance, drivers, and temporary workers. Miguel stopped washing a plate. The water continued running over his hands. Adrian looked toward him. How often have you worked without a full meal? Miguel swallowed. Most weekends, sir. Why did you not report it? Gordon answered before the young man could. Because no one has been denied food. Preferences and timing are being confused with deprivation. Lena's eyes moved to the bread she had divided. He asked me for half because he had not eaten since morning. Gordon faced her. You do not know his schedule. I know hunger when I see it. The sentence was quiet, but it carried across the room. Margaret closed the binder. Daniel lowered his eyes. Even the servers waiting near the doors stopped pretending not to listen. Adrian studied Lena for a long moment. She had not spoken to embarrass Gordon. She had spoken because Miguel was still standing beside a sink while food enough for dozens waited under silver covers. Bring plates for everyone working more than 6 hours, Adrian said. Gordon shook his head. That will delay the first course. Then simplify the first course. The menu was approved weeks ago. Human beings were approved before menus. Gordon froze. Adrian stood from the chair, but left his bowl untouched. The dinner will continue. Every employee will eat a complete hot meal during this shift. Margaret will supervise the schedule. Daniel will control portions. You will not change anyone's hours, duties, or employment status. Gordon's face lost color at the final instruction. Adrian had not accused him of retaliation. He had made certain it could not happen. Lena looked around the staff table as bowls and plates began to appear before people who had never been invited to sit there. Miguel took the chair across from her. A maintenance worker entered cautiously. From the service hall, Daniel placed soup in front of both of them without asking permission. Upstairs, guests gathered beneath chandeliers to hear speeches about fairness. Downstairs, fairness had finally taken a seat before anyone delivered a single word. The first course reached the formal dining room only 4 minutes late, and none of the guests upstairs knew why. Servers moved beneath the chandeliers with silver trays while Adrian stood at the podium and welcomed donors to an evening dedicated to fairness in the workplace. His speech had been prepared in advance, but the words now felt different in his mouth. He looked through the open doors toward the service hallway, where Lena was helping Margaret organize meal breaks for employees who had never been invited to sit together. Dignity is not a slogan, Adrian told the room. It is measured by what happens when no one important is watching. Several guests nodded, believing the sentence referred to the charity. Adrian knew it referred to his own house. Downstairs, Gordon continued directing dinner service under Margaret's supervision. His instructions remained precise, but the authority behind them had changed. Every staff meal was counted. Every portion was recorded. Daniel placed hot plates before dishwashers, drivers, housekeepers, and maintenance workers in rotating groups. No one was allowed to remain at a sink or in a hallway simply because Gordon considered their work less important. Lena finished her soup in 10 quiet minutes, then returned to the pantry to polish the final set of dessert forks. Adrian found her there between courses. Why are you working? He asked. Because my shift is not finished. You were just humiliated in front of the kitchen. Lena folded a white cloth over one fork. That does not make the guest responsible for dirty silverware. Adrian studied her. She did not use suffering as an excuse, and she did not mistake endurance for approval. How long has this been happening? He asked. Lena placed the fork in its tray. Since before I started. 8 months. At least. And no one reported it. People reported pieces of it. Adrian's expression sharpened. To whom? Lena looked toward the doorway before answering. Mrs. Sloan heard complaints about meal timing. Daniel questioned the portions. A former day cook challenged the invoices. What happened to her? She left. Voluntarily. Lena did not answer immediately. Her name was Patricia Green. Gordon reduced her shifts after she asked why staff food costs kept rising while the meals kept getting smaller. Adrian felt the words settle into place. Do you know where she is? I have a telephone number. Why? Lena opened the bottom drawer of the pantry cabinet and removed a plain envelope. Inside were copies of kitchen invoices, meal schedules, and handwritten notes. She gave these to me before she left. Adrian took the papers, but did not open them yet. Why you? Because I was the only person who stayed after she spoke. The sentence carried no pride, only fact. Lena explained that Patricia had noticed premium ingredients billed to staff meals even though those items appeared only on private event menus. She had compared delivery records with employee portions and found repeated gaps. Gordon called the differences substitutions. When Patricia asked for written explanations, her schedule dropped from 5 days a week to 2. She resigned before missing another rent payment. Why did you keep this? Adrian asked. Lena looked toward the kitchen, where Miguel was sitting at the table with a full plate for the first time. Because one day someone might be willing to look. Adrian opened the envelope. The first invoice listed imported mushrooms, specialty oils, and expensive cuts of meat under the staff meal account. None of those ingredients had appeared in the cold containers Lena described. Margaret entered the pantry and stopped when she saw the documents. I should have brought this to you, she said. Adrian looked at her. Why did you not? Because Gordon's reputation protected him. Every event succeeded. Every guest praised the food. I convinced myself the complaints were management disagreements. Adrian closed the envelope. Success upstairs does not excuse what happened downstairs. Margaret lowered her eyes. Lena returned to the silver tray, but Adrian gently moved the cloth from her hand. No more polishing tonight. She looked at him. My shift is still active. Then your assignment has changed. He placed the envelope on the counter. You are going to help Margaret identify every employee affected, every missing meal, and every schedule change connected to a complaint. Lena did not immediately agree. Will their hours be protected? In writing. Will Gordon see their statements? Not without independent review. And Patricia? Adrian looked at the invoices again. Call her. From the kitchen, Gordon's voice announced the dessert course with the same confidence he had used all evening. He did not know the records had survived. He did not know the woman he had sent away with cold bread had been carrying the truth for months. Adrian handed Lena his private office card. Tell Patricia someone is finally ready to listen. Patricia Green answered on the 4th ring. Lena stood in Adrian's private office with the door closed, one hand holding the telephone and the other resting beside the envelope of invoices. The charity dinner continued beyond the walls, softened into distant music and polite applause. Patricia, it is Lena Brooks, she said. There was a pause. Is everything all right? Patricia asked. Someone is finally willing to look at the records. The silence on the other end lasted long enough for Lena to hear the woman breathe. Who? Mr. Bellucci. Patricia gave a tired laugh, without humor. He owns the house. He owned it when they cut my hours. Lena glanced toward Adrian, who stood several feet away beside the desk. He did not interrupt. He is listening now, she said. I need to know whether you are willing to speak with an independent reviewer. Patricia did not answer immediately. When she finally did, her voice had changed. I kept the originals. Adrian looked up. Lena tightened her grip on the telephone. Where? In a storage box at my sister's apartment. Invoices, delivery logs, photographs of the staff meals, and copies of the schedule before Gordon changed it. Why did you keep everything? Because I knew one day he would say none of it happened. Adrian held out his hand, and Lena passed him a notepad. He wrote that Patricia would be contacted by an outside auditor, not household management, and that transportation would be arranged if she agreed. Lena read the message aloud. Patricia remained cautious. Will Gordon know where I live? No, Adrian said from across the room, speaking loudly enough for her to hear. And no one connected to him will contact you directly. Patricia recognized his voice. Mr. Bellucci? Yes. You should have known. The accusation entered the office without ceremony. Adrian did not defend himself. You are right. Patricia went silent. Powerful men often explained why they had missed what others suffered. Adrian offered no explanation. I trusted the results, he continued. I did not examine the cost of producing them. Patricia's voice softened only slightly. The cost was people. I understand that now. Then prove it. That is what the review is for. Patricia agreed to meet the following morning. After the call ended, Adrian instructed Margaret to contact an accounting firm that had never worked with Gordon or the Bellucci Hospitality Group. Every kitchen invoice, payroll adjustment, delivery receipt, and employee meal record from the previous 18 months would be preserved before midnight. Gordon would retain authority only over completing the current dinner service. He would have no access to administrative files, staff schedules, or inventory records. Margaret hesitated. Should we inform him now? Adrian looked toward the clock. Dessert was being served upstairs. After the final guest leaves. Not before the documents are secured. Lena watched Margaret leave with the envelope. He will know I kept the records, she said. Yes. He can make the staff blame me for what happens next. Adrian considered that risk. Then I will speak to them first. He did not wait until morning. At 11:20, after the last owner stepped into a waiting car, Adrian asked every employee still on the property to gather in the staff dining room. Gordon stood near the doorway in his chef coat, no longer surrounded by the noise and urgency that had protected his authority. Lena sat beside Miguel and Daniel at the same table she had been ordered to leave hours earlier. Adrian remained standing until everyone else had found a chair. An independent review begins tonight, he said. It will examine staff meals, food purchasing, schedules, and any changes connected to employee complaints. Gordon stepped forward. Mr. Bellucci, I should be permitted to respond before rumors damage the kitchen. You will respond to the auditors. Adrian looked across the room. Until then, no employee will lose hours, assignments, housing, or future opportunities for giving an honest statement. Several people exchanged uncertain glances. The promise sounded important, but fear built over months did not disappear in one meeting. Lena raised her hand slightly. Will statements be private? Adrian turned toward her. Yes. Will employees receive copies of what they sign? Yes. And will the review include people who already left? Yes. Each answer steadied the room. Gordon looked at Lena as though seeing her clearly for the first time. You are turning a meal disagreement into an attack on my career. Lena met his eyes. You made it larger than a meal when you decided some workers deserved less because you thought they could not object. No one moved. Adrian did not speak for her or soften the sentence. Gordon looked around for support and found only faces that had spent too long avoiding his attention. Daniel broke the silence. Patricia was right about the invoices. Miguel followed. And the portions? Margaret placed the secured records on the table. The documents will decide the rest. Adrian looked at Lena, then at the chair beside her where he had sat earlier. That single act had opened a door, but what came through it was larger than either of them expected. The kitchen had not been divided by one cruel sentence. It had been divided by a system that depended on everyone believing silence was safer than truth. That night, for the first time, the truth had more witnesses than fear. By 9 the next morning, the staff dining room no longer resembled the place where Lena had been told she did not belong. 3 independent auditors occupied the far end of the table with laptops, sealed folders, and numbered evidence bags for original receipts. Patricia Green arrived wearing a brown wool coat and carrying a storage box against her chest. She paused at the doorway when she saw Gordon seated across the room beside a representative from the accounting firm. For a moment, the old fear returned to her face. Lena stood and pulled out the chair beside her. You can sit here, she said. Patricia looked at the chair, then at Gordon. I was told that once before. This time it is not his decision. Adrian heard the words from the doorway. He entered without an entourage and took a seat near Margaret rather than at the head of the table. The auditors controlled the process, not him. Gordon's attorney had arrived shortly before 9 and objected to Patricia being interviewed in the same building where she had worked. The lead auditor offered a private room, a written statement, and the option to leave at any time. Patricia chose to remain. She opened the storage box slowly. Inside were dated photographs of staff meals, copies of delivery slips, handwritten inventory counts, and schedules showing the reduction of her shifts after she questioned the budget. These were taken over 6 months, she said. I started documenting because the invoices stopped matching what came through the kitchen. The lead auditor compared one delivery record with a purchasing report. 12 pounds of premium beef had been charged to the employee meal account on a Tuesday when staff received vegetable stew. A second invoice listed imported cheese for 36 meals, though photographs showed cold sandwiches without cheese. Gordon leaned toward his attorney. Those ingredients were substituted across menus. That is normal cost management. Patricia opened a spiral notebook. Then the substitutions should appear in inventory adjustments. They do not. Daniel, seated near the wall, confirmed that premium ingredients were often moved to private events after being billed to the staff budget. Miguel explained how dishwashing employees were told food had run out even when full trays remained in the warming area. One by one, the statements aligned. Gordon's decisions had not only divided the table, they had hidden money behind the division. Lena listened without interruption until the auditor asked when she first realized the policy was not official. When Mrs. Sloan showed me the employee handbook 3 months ago, she said. Margaret lowered her eyes. I told her the written policy applied to everyone, but I also warned her that challenging Gordon could affect her schedule. Adrian turned toward Margaret. She did not avoid the truth. I believed I was protecting her job, she said. Instead, I taught her that the rules mattered less than his approval. Adrian looked around the table. And I allowed one person's reputation to carry more authority than written policy. Gordon gave a restrained sigh. This has become a performance of collective guilt. The kitchen produced excellent results. No one was denied compensation. Lena met his eyes. A meal was part of the compensation. He looked away. The auditor then presented a preliminary comparison showing more than $40,000 in unexplained charges over 18 months. The figure did not prove personal theft, but it established enough irregularity to require a full forensic review. Gordon was placed on paid administrative leave, his access to financial systems and staff schedules suspended immediately. Adrian did not announce a final judgment. He allowed the evidence to determine what came next. When the meeting ended, Patricia remained seated, staring at the table where she had once been told not to question the invoices. I thought keeping records was pointless, she said. Lena touched the edge of the storage box. It was only pointless while no one was willing to read them. Adrian stood several feet away, understanding that his decision to sit beside Lena had not created the truth. It had only removed the chair that had been blocking it. The full review continued for 4 days, and each new document made the old kitchen hierarchy harder to defend. Auditors traced staff meal charges to private tasting events, donor dinners, and specialty menus that had nothing to do with employee food. They also found a pattern in the schedules. Workers who questioned missing meals often lost weekend shifts within 2 pay periods, while those who remained silent received the most reliable hours. The records did not prove that every change had been retaliation, but they proved the system rewarded silence. Adrian read the preliminary report in his study before sunrise on the 5th day. The total unexplained charges had risen beyond $50,000, and several scheduling decisions lacked any written business reason. Gordon remained on leave while the auditors prepared their final findings. Adrian closed the report and looked through the window at the winter lawn. He had trusted reputation because it was efficient. Gordon produced flawless dinners, impressed wealthy guests, and never allowed disorder to reach the formal rooms. The cost of that perfection had remained below stairs, carried by people whose names Adrian barely knew. At 8, he asked Lena to meet him in the staff dining room. She arrived in her gray uniform with a notebook tucked beneath one arm. The long table was empty except for 2 cups of coffee and the printed report between them. Adrian pulled out a chair, but Lena remained standing. Am I here as housekeeping staff or as a witness? She asked. The question stopped him. As both, unless you want those roles separated. I do. Lena placed the notebook on the table. When I am giving information about the review, I need that time recorded separately. I do not want anyone saying I neglected my regular work. Adrian nodded. That is reasonable. And the other employees should be paid for interview time. They will be. Lena sat down only after he wrote the instruction on the first page of the report. Adrian watched her read the preliminary findings. She moved slowly, pausing at the section describing reduced schedules. Patricia should receive the wages she lost if the final review confirms retaliation, she said. Agreed. The temporary workers need the same protection even if they are hired through an agency. Agreed. And changing the meal policy is not enough if the people controlling schedules can punish anyone who complains. Adrian leaned back. What would prevent that? Lena opened her notebook. She had prepared 6 recommendations: written meal standards, anonymous reporting, protected interview time, documented reasons for major schedule reductions, quarterly budget reviews, and employee representatives from every department. Adrian read the list twice. You thought about this before today. I thought about it while eating in the laundry hallway. The answer carried no bitterness, which made it more difficult to hear. Adrian looked at the cup before him. My mother believed everyone working in this house should receive a proper meal. Then someone used her principle as decoration, and I never checked whether it was being followed. Lena closed the notebook. You are checking now. Because I happened to hear Gordon. No, she said. You heard him because you entered the kitchen. You learned the rest because you stayed. Adrian considered the distinction. It did not absolve him, but it gave him responsibility beyond regret. Later that morning, he gathered the entire household staff in the main dining room rather than the basement. The long table had been set with simple plates, water glasses, and enough chairs for every department. Patricia attended by invitation. Temporary workers were paid for the hour. Adrian stood at the head, but did not sit. The preliminary review confirmed serious failures in food purchasing, staff treatment, and scheduling oversight, he said. Those failures occurred under my roof. Responsibility does not end with the person who managed the kitchen. Margaret looked toward him. Daniel sat beside Miguel. Lena remained near the middle of the table, not beside Adrian and not hidden at the edge. Effective today, meal access is equal for every employee, Adrian continued. No department will receive lesser food. No worker will be sent to a hallway, loading area, or sink because someone believes rank determines dignity. He introduced the new reporting protections and announced that back pay and lost hours would be reviewed individually. No applause followed. The staff had heard promises before. Adrian expected trust to arrive slowly. When the meeting ended, employees remained at the table for lunch. A maintenance worker passed. Bread to a pastry chef. Miguel filled Patricia's water glass. Lena looked at the empty chair beside her just as Adrian approached. Is this seat taken? He asked. She looked around the table, where no place had been marked by department or rank. Not anymore, she said. Adrian sat down, and this time, no one in the room stopped eating. The meal ended without ceremony, but the arrangement that followed changed the estate more deeply than any speech could have. Over the next week, every department selected one representative for a new staff council. Daniel represented the kitchen, Miguel spoke for dishwashing, a maintenance worker named Frank Ellis represented facilities, and Lena was chosen by housekeeping. She did not volunteer. Her co-workers asked her because she had kept Patricia's records when everyone else believed speaking would only cost them work. Adrian attended the first meeting but did not lead it. He sat at the side of the room while the representatives reviewed the proposed meal policy, scheduling protections, and complaint process. Lena noticed how often people looked toward him before speaking. Years of hierarchy could not be erased by adding chairs. This will not work if everyone needs your expression to know whether an idea is safe, she told him after the meeting. Adrian looked toward the empty table. What do you suggest? Do not attend every session. He considered the request. You want less oversight. We want space to disagree without wondering whether disagreement changes how you see us. Adrian nodded. Then the council meets without management twice each month. Written recommendations come to Margaret and me afterward. And responses should be written too. Agreed. Lena added the condition to the policy draft. She had spent years accepting verbal assurances because requesting more could be treated as ingratitude. Now she understood that dignity became more durable when it was written clearly enough that no personality could erase it. The final audit arrived the following Friday. It confirmed that Gordon had repeatedly charged premium ingredients to the employee meal budget, moved those ingredients to private events, and concealed the substitutions through incomplete inventory adjustments. It also found that several workers who complained had experienced unjustified reductions in hours. The auditors could not determine that every missing dollar benefited Gordon personally, but the findings established serious misconduct, falsified reporting, and misuse of authority. Adrian met with Gordon in the smaller conference room. Margaret and an employment attorney were present. Lena was not asked to attend. Adrian understood that she had provided evidence, not volunteered to witness another person's consequence. Gordon read the report in silence before placing it on the table. "You are ending 20 years of work over staff meals," he said. "No," Adrian replied. "Your decisions ended your employment. The meals revealed them." Gordon looked toward Margaret. "The kitchen was successful. The guests were satisfied," she said. "That was not the same thing. His employment was terminated according to the terms of his contract." The findings were forwarded to the Bellucci Hospitality Group board, and the accounting firm began reviewing other properties where he had controlled food budgets. Adrian did not make a public spectacle of the decision. Quiet justice did not require humiliation to prove it had arrived. Patricia received payment for the hours the review determined she had lost after raising concerns. She was offered her former position, but she declined. Instead, she accepted a paid role helping design kitchen accountability standards across the hospitality group. "I do not want to return to the same job," she told Lena. "I want to make sure no one else has to leave theirs for telling the truth." Lena smiled. "That sounds like a better position." The estate hired a new interim chef, but Adrian required the staff council to participate in the permanent selection. Candidates were evaluated not only on menus and experience, but also on how they managed breaks, budgets, and employees without prestigious titles. During one interview, a celebrated chef spoke brilliantly about technique, but referred to dishwashers as replaceable labor. Lena closed her folder. "We are finished," she said. The candidate looked toward Adrian, expecting him to overrule her. Adrian stood. "You heard her." 2 weeks later, the staff dining room held one long table during the evening meal. Hot soup, fresh bread, and roasted vegetables were served in the same portions to every department. Lena entered after finishing the guest rooms and saw a place waiting beside Adrian. He had begun joining staff lunch once each week, not as a performance, but because listening had become part of how he managed the house. She sat down and unfolded her napkin. "You do not have to keep proving the point," she said. Adrian passed her the bread basket. "I am not proving it." Around them, conversation continued without lowering when he entered. "I am learning what the house sounds like when no one is afraid to speak." 3 weeks later, the Bellucci estate hosted another dinner, but the kitchen no longer divided people according to the value others assigned to their uniforms. The new staff meal policy had been posted beside the time clock in plain language. Every worker received the same quality of food, every break was recorded, and scheduled changes required written reasons. More important, employees had begun using the system. Miguel reported a missed break without apologizing. Frank challenged a maintenance schedule that left one person covering 2 buildings. Daniel asked the staff council to review late-night kitchen staffing before the holiday season. No one was punished. Each small act made the next one easier. Lena noticed the change most clearly during evening service. The kitchen still moved quickly, but fear no longer controlled the rhythm. People asked questions. They corrected mistakes before they became emergencies. The interim chef listened when a dishwasher explained that the drying racks were placed too far from the sinks. The racks were moved the next morning. Gordon had once called that kind of suggestion disorder. The new kitchen called it useful. Adrian watched the transformation from a distance, careful not to turn every improvement into proof of his own character. He knew the house had changed because employees had spoken, not because he had permitted them to have voices. One afternoon, Margaret asked Lena to join her in the small office beside the pantry. A typed proposal rested on the desk. "The hospitality group is creating an employee standards position," Margaret said. "It will review meal access, scheduling, and complaint procedures across 5 properties." Lena looked at the page but did not touch it. "Why are you showing this to me?" "Because Patricia recommended you. I am a housekeeper. You are also the person who understood where the system failed." Lena read the description carefully. The role included training, confidential interviews, policy review, and travel between properties. The salary was higher than her housekeeping wages, but the responsibility was larger too. "Did Mr. Bellucci create this for me?" she asked. Margaret shook her head. "The audit recommended the position. Patricia helped define it. You are one of 4 candidates." Relief moved across Lena's face before she could hide it. She had not wanted a reward built from pity. She wanted the chance to be judged by the work. "Then I will interview," she said. The panel included Patricia, Margaret, a human resources director, and one staff representative from another Bellucci hotel. Adrian did not attend. When Lena asked why, Margaret answered honestly. He said his presence might influence the room. Lena understood the choice more than any recommendation he could have made. During the interview, she spoke about written protections, anonymous reporting, and the danger of celebrating efficiency without measuring what employees sacrificed to produce it. She did not present herself as the woman Adrian had defended. She presented herself as someone who had watched a policy fail and knew how to make it harder for silence to become part of the job. 2 days later, she received the offer. Lena found Adrian in the library after dinner, reading the final report from the hospitality group. "I accepted the position," she said. He closed the folder. "I heard. You stayed out of the interview. It was not my decision to make. You could have made it yours." Adrian looked at her steadily. "That is what I am trying to stop doing." Lena allowed herself a small smile. "Patricia says the first property visit is next Monday. Are you ready?" No, the answer surprised him. Lena continued before he could respond. "But being ready is not the same as knowing everything. It means being willing to ask the people who do." Adrian nodded slowly. "You taught me that." "I did not teach you." She glanced toward the dining room beyond the library doors, where staff voices carried through the hallway without dropping when someone important passed. "You finally listened." On Monday morning, Lena arrived at the first Bellucci hotel wearing a dark blue suit and carrying a plain notebook. The executive chef greeted her politely, then began explaining how well his kitchen operated. Lena let him finish. Afterward, she walked past the polished dining room and entered the employee break area. A dishwasher, 2 housekeepers, and a maintenance worker sat around a small table eating the same hot meal as the management staff. Lena pulled out a chair and sat with them. "Tell me what the policy looks like from here," she said. No one told her she did not belong. This time, the table was where the truth began. 6 months later, the long staff table at the Bellucci estate held no reserved places, no departmental signs, and no invisible rules about who deserved to sit closest to the kitchen. Housekeepers, cooks, drivers, maintenance workers, and managers shared the same meal beneath warm pendant lights, while conversation moved freely across the room. Lena entered carrying a folder from her latest property review and paused near the doorway. She no longer wore the gray housekeeping uniform. Her dark blue suit was simple, her notebook tucked beneath one arm, and the confidence in her posture had been earned through months of listening to workers others had overlooked. The Employee Standards Program had expanded to every Bellucci property in Connecticut and New York. Meal policies were now audited quarterly. Schedule reductions required documented reasons. Anonymous complaints went to an independent office. Staff representatives attended operational reviews with the same access to reports as senior managers. None of the changes had eliminated every problem. But problems could no longer survive simply because the person affected lacked rank. Adrian sat near the middle of the table rather than at the head. He had learned that leadership did not require the most visible chair. When he saw Lena, he stood and pulled out the empty seat beside him. "Is this one available?" he asked. Lena looked at the chair, remembering the night Gordon had pulled her soup away and told her she did not belong. "It depends," she said. "Are you planning to finish all the bread again?" A quiet laugh moved around the table. Adrian placed one hand over his heart with mock seriousness. "I have been formally warned." She sat down, and Daniel passed her a bowl of vegetable soup. Miguel, now training new dishwashing employees, handed her the bread basket. Patricia sat across from them reviewing a draft policy for seasonal workers. Margaret poured water for herself before offering it to anyone else. A small habit she had learned after years of placing every other need first. The room no longer stopped when Adrian entered. That was how he knew the change was real. People continued speaking. Questions continued being asked. No one checked his face before expressing disagreement. During the meal, Patricia announced that the group's newest hotel had corrected unpaid break time for 14 employees after Lena's review uncovered inconsistent records. Daniel reported that food waste had decreased because staff meals were now planned rather than treated as leftovers. Margaret explained that employee turnover had fallen across the properties using the new council system. Adrian listened without claiming any achievement as his own. The results belonged to the people who had built them. After lunch, Lena remained at the table to finish notes from her morning visit. Adrian returned carrying 2 cups of coffee and placed one beside her. "Your first annual report is due next week," he said. I know. The board expects it to be uncomfortable. Then they are finally expecting the right thing. Adrian smiled faintly. You have changed the way this company measures success. Lena closed her notebook. I changed where you were willing to look. That too. Through the open kitchen doors, the afternoon staff prepared dinner without dividing food by title. A young housekeeper entered the dining room, hesitated beside the table, and looked around for permission. Lena recognized the uncertainty immediately. She moved her folder from the chair beside her. You can sit here, she said. The woman glanced toward Adrian. He did not speak. Lena understood why. Permission from the most powerful person in the room would have repeated the very system they had worked to dismantle. She looked back at the housekeeper. You do not need to ask anyone. The woman sat down slowly. Conversation resumed. Adrian watched the simple moment with the same attention he once reserved for business deals worth millions. The night he had taken a seat beside Lena, he believed he was defending her from one man's cruelty. He later understood that dignity could not depend on whether a powerful person happened to witness injustice. It had to be built into every rule, every meal, and every chair left open at the table. He had not lowered himself by sitting beside the Black Maid. He had finally risen to the level of her dignity.